Hi, welcome to our segment on working with landscape designers. I think it's really important to understand and demystify what landscape designers do and why they might be a valuable addition to your sustainable landscape project. I'm here today with Natasha Elliott. She's got a wonderfully named company, Sweet Smiling Landscapes, and we're in this beautiful renovation of a typical backyard landscape to talk about how she works, how people find her, and give you some design insights. So once you know this is a good fit, that it's a project that you can work on, what happens at the first meeting? How do things get started, and what do the clients bring to the table?
First generally starts first with a conversation over the phone. Then we come out and we start to talk about the needs of the landscape. In this case, it was a pool. And so we talked about, getting the pool out and then what? And she told me that she liked to entertain. And so I wanted to make sure to provide space for her to hang out. She's into dogs. She wanted a dog-friendly space, a kid-friendly space. She was taking the pool out because she was concerned about water. Filling a pool takes a lot of water, so we wanted to make sure it was a drought-tolerant landscape.
So I find that one of the things that designers are able to do is to take very general statements from a client and figure out what you're actually going to put into the garden. What do you do when somebody gives you a question, when somebody says to you, I like a lot of color? How do you deal with something like that so you can actually get down to a color scheme, a certain type of style?
Well, when they say I like a lot of color, they have to really define what they mean by a lot of color. There's color in flowers, there's color in plant foliage, there's color in pottery, there's color in furnishings. So really understanding what they're trying to say with coloring. Maybe you can make a beautiful garden with all gray foliage and then you put some pops of color in the furniture. Maybe that's not their style. So yeah, understanding what they mean by a lot of color. And where do you want to use the color?
And you do that by asking more questions and showing
more
them
questions.
examples. Yeah.
Yeah, generally the first 10 to 15 minutes of a consultation, I just try to ask questions to really understand that person, get a sense of their personality, their style. Sometimes I like to come into their house, ask them what their favorite pieces of furniture are in their house, that kind of thing.
So you've quoted a price, you got a contract from somebody, now it's time to actually start. So what is your process to get something on paper so you can share that with your client?
Yeah, so first I start with, explaining the look that they're going for, the style that we're going for. Then, what elements do you need? Do you want a patio? Do you need walkways? Do you need to get from the driveway to the front door better?
So you've got a contract, there's some money exchange, you got some signatures. You mentioned you come out and you measure the property, etc. So when you get back to the office and you start working on the project, what's the first deliverable look like?
Yeah, so the first process is to come out and measure. And when I come out and measure, I usually give myself extra time than just actually taking the measurements, because I like to sit there and just really get a sense of how it feels to be in that space. I listen to the noises, get a real sensory sense of the space, see the sight lines. Sometimes that doesn't all stick in the first meeting. And then I come back to the office and I take my chicken scratch notes and put them into a base plan in AutoCAD so that I can start playing around with the layout.
This is the first thing that the client sees back from you.
So I get the base plan down, and then I know that they wanted an area for sit-down dining for large places. They wanted some sort of lawn area, they wanted a fire pit, and they wanted to grow vegetables. So those were the elements I knew I needed to play around. Once I put them in, I thought, well, you really need a water feature, and a fence would be nice here because it's nice to grow berries along them. And so as I thought about their needs, kind of creative solutions came up. I draw them out, and then this one I'm really trying to bring the garden to life. So I add color, and then I also come in and take inspirational images that kind of flesh out what this plan view image is. So that's what this is. This is the kind of fencing that I'm thinking for here. This is the bench area. For a lot of people, it's hard to envision the space from a plan view. that's what I'm good at, not everybody else. So I try my best to make it as digestible and understandable so that we make sure that everybody's on the same page and everybody's happy.
Great. Well, I think it's a beautiful, contemporary, really crisp-looking garden. Could you explain what the different spaces are and what they do?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, this was originally a swimming pool. So once they took out the swimming pool, we were left with pretty much a blank slate, which gave a lot of opportunity. And it's a decent sized yard, it's not huge. And so I really just envisioned like one giant living room. And, you know, living room needs to feel cozy. And so wanted to put the trees there to provide shade. And my idea was almost that it gives you a big hug.
So one thing I really like that you did here in your practice, and I guess you do it as clients are willing, is you not only dealt with the macro here, how the spaces are used and the construction material, but you also had a hand in accessorizing. So talk a little about that and also follow up. What happens after the job is done?
Yeah, so start with thinking about hardscape layout and where the planter beds are going to go, and then as you go it gets refined, and eventually you end up wanting to accessorize, and I love having a hand in that. I think coming in and doing pots are always a good idea. Almost every landscape needs a few nice pieces of pottery, and so coming in and selecting the right pottery and the plants to go in them is adds just an extra touch and is a really fun opportunity to play with color and texture.
Well, the thing that I like here is in the rest of the garden you used kind of a broad brush approach to planting, but the nice thing here is you get to sit here and see the complexity of these things. You get to see them up close. So, and once the garden's installed, is that it? You wave goodbye and cash the check, or what's the rest of the life of the project?
No, I mean, when you're creating a landscape, you're creating a living, breathing, ecological system, and sometimes that needs a little maintenance to make sure it's on the right track. So I always like to come back, check in, help provide maintenance guidance, and then, you know, because they're plants and they grow, light changes, things get too big, you know, over the course of a garden, every 5 to 10 years, it's a good idea to come in and do a little bit of a revamp.
Yeah, well, one saying I heard is that a garden is a process, not a product. So it's never done, and like you say, shade happens.
Yeah, or sometimes I like to think of it as designing in 4 dimensions, and the 4th dimension is time.
Exactly.
That's a huge element, both with like staggering flowering times, you know, if something's deciduous, and then also just thinking about the longevity of the process. And I always try to design for longevity, but you know, some plants have longer lifespans than the others, some don't, so there's always changes that need to happen.
This has been great. I love the garden, love your plant choices, love hearing about your process. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.